So now we're going to do a discussion about graphing data. So, this is a multi-step process to get a graphical representation of the data. You've already seen a couple of examples of graph data with the single subject design work. The first step is just get the data. So within response to intervention, we tend to use more curriculum-based measurement. However, if we're doing positive behavioral supports, it might be that we're doing observation data. So you might have data that's like percent out of 100. So he's doing that action 20% of the time. It might be some sort of event recording data that says, I watched him for 10 minutes and he did it this number of times. It may be that you have a behavior rating scale like the Basque Flex Monitor, where you're looking at specific behaviors and getting a rating just for those that the teacher or the individual fills out. So whatever your data is, normative data doesn't tend to be as useful for this because you're not really comparing back to, you're not getting the kind of data that you can see growth in the same way that you can with curriculum-based measurement or some of the other things we just discussed. So when you go to develop the graph, you want to have the data that you collected on the left-hand side and then the time across the bottom. So you'll notice here in this example, it was words per minute and weeks of instruction. It is beneficial for you to make sure that when you put the time, it's regular increments that make sense, or that's readable by the person. So, with an example, you might put the actual dates that the data was collected, or if it's multiple data points in the same day, the time of day that the data was collected. But if you're going to just do weeks of instruction, you have to be really cautious when you collect your data. You can't, for example, collect some data on Friday of one week and then Monday of the next, because this implies weeks of instruction that you were talking about 7 days between each data point. So you would want to make sure that if you're collecting data each week, it's on, or as close to possible, the same day each week. And I know this should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. It should also be the same data collected each week. For example, if you're going to give a rating scale, you can't choose 3 items that you like on it for week 1, but in week 2, you change those for 2 or 3 others, or you add some more or take away others. And so it's really important for you to make sure that the data is consistent and your baseline data should be the exact kind of data that you collect as your actual intervention data, and the weeks or amount of time is consistent. Now, one thing you can do sometimes with the baseline data is you can collect it, say that you're going to collect your treatment data every week, but you want to get 3 data points. You could do, say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday of 1 week for your baseline data, and then collect your data after that. But you just want to make sure that what you write on your graph makes it clear that that's how the data was collected. Right? And then you just graph your data. So you take the score that you got for week 1, since this is weeks of instruction, and apparently the score must have been like a 25 or something. So you plop it in there, and there you go. So one of my problems with this particular graph has to do with all of this white space here. They chose to do 0 to 200, and yet no score is bigger than 80. And so that makes little nuance, like between 20, like that is actually a pretty big jump. It just doesn't look like it because there's 20 points difference between data points. So what I want to make sure that you keep in mind is that I might want to, in this situation, have actually just made it so that instead of every 20 words per minute, you have a tick on the graph. It might be that it's instead of 0, 20, 40, it might be 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, or 0, 10, 20, 30. And I feel like instead of having all this extra white space up here, the differences here might show better. So it's important that you have all the parts done correctly and that you think about the way the data is presented. So you guys have hopefully access to some graphing data. And, so then you'll just, and if you don't have a graph, you can find images for graphs on Google Images just fine. So the first thing you have here is that you're going to graph some scores on some graph paper. And to do that, you're going to need to administer at least 8 weeks of data. And so we have this information. For James, we looked at passage reading fluency each week for 8 weeks, and here are his scores: 44, 48, 46, 50, 54, 52, 54, 56. So that's 8 data points. And so we're going to graph them. So we put at the bottom week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, etc. And then on the side here we have his scores: 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And so then we see the actual scores. Here's our problem. First of all, we don't have any baseline data, which is not really great. You really want to have baseline data. And the other is we do have the big white space again. So you don't have to start your graphs at 0. You could have started this graph at 30, and then instead of having 30, 40, 50, you could even have, 30, 35, 40, 45, and then you would be able to see the data in a more meaningful way and leaving out this big white section of no data. So you have been able to develop the graph, just make a really basic graph and plot basic data. But, the data is kind of meaningless without some way of interpreting it. Right now you have kind of a jigged, jagged sort of data kind of thing going on. And what we really want is some sort of trend line. So what you need to do is figure out kind of what is the average gain per week for the child. So you would need to administer at least 8 weeks of data, subtract the highest score from the lowest score, divide this difference by the number of weeks. So this gives you your rate of improvement. So I'm going to go through this with you again. This really is just kind of trying to figure out, so the lowest score, let's say, was the baseline score of 10. And then you did it for 8 weeks, and then now he has a 40. So how much did he gain? Well, he gained from 10 to 40, which means he gained 30 points. So that's 30 points, but that doesn't tell us anything. We need to know how many points per week he is gaining. So you would take the 30 points, and let's say he did it for 10 weeks. That means that he is doing 3 points per week. He has made a 3 points per week gain, and we figured that out by subtracting his lowest score from his highest score and then dividing by the number of weeks. So then you would multiply the ROI by the number of weeks remaining. So if you think it's going to be another 10 more weeks, then you would say, all right, well, he's gained 3 points per week for these previous 10 weeks. For 10 more weeks, we think he's going to probably gain another 3 points per week. For 10 weeks is another 30 points. So then we would have a dot at the 10, which is where we started, the 40, which is where he ended, and then the 70, which is where you think he's going to end. And so you have, so you would be able to kind of graph out where you think he's going to go. And then you could connect from a line where he started to where you think he's going, and that tells you his trend. I'm going to make sure that you get an example of that now. So the example is that you have a first grader who takes a passage reading fluency, some sort of curriculum-based measurement, each week for 8 weeks. So here are all his scores. First, you identify the lowest score, which was a 44, and his highest score, which is a 56. You subtract the highest score from the lowest score, which is 56 minus 44 is 12. He did this for 8 weeks. So when you divide that 12 by 8, it says that his average growth is 1.5, or his average rate of improvement, ROI, is 1.5 points each week. So if we were going to do 8 more weeks, you could figure that out by just multiplying the 1.5 by 8 and then adding that. So you have an idea of where he should be going based off his current rate of improvement. So this right here is a chance for us to kind of go through this. It looks like it's the same one again. What is the average gain per week for the target child? Administer 8 weeks of data, subtract the highest from the lowest, then multiply the ROI by the remaining weeks. We have James, here are his scores. I subtract the highest from the lowest, which is 56 minus 44 is 12. Divide this difference by the number of weeks. 1.5 is the ROI. Multiply this by the remaining weeks. So in this example, he had 4 more weeks. So 4 times 1.5 means that in 4 more weeks, he should gain 6 more points. And his last score was 56, add 6. So in 4 weeks, we expect him to be making a 62. And this shows you what that would look like. So we see what his week 1 baseline score was. We said it was a 44. And we think he is going to be continuing his growth, going to make a 66 at the end. So this dotted line is his trend line. So you see his trend line here. So this gives you an idea of of where we think he's going. So you have 2 choices: the original line, the jiggada-jaggada kind of line here, which is not nearly as meaningful as this dotted line, which kind of gives us an idea of how he's going to be doing. So then we want to know, well, okay, so that's how he's doing. How should he be doing? Because having a comparison makes all the difference for this. So what is the average gain per week for a normal child? So you would get that data from somewhere. So here, the data example I have for you is norms that are provided based off a national data set. A lot of times in schools, they like to collect what are called local norms, which would say, we give this to all the kids in the school, in fall, winter, and spring. And then based off of that, we can determine the average rate of improvement for all the kids. And we find that, the average rate of improvement is whatever. So you have 2 choices. You can either use the national slope or rate of improvement information, or you can use local ones that you develop yourself. So what you would do now is look it up. So for him, we had passage reading fluency, which was what he was doing. So here we are, is the chart for passage reading fluency. And we said that he was in 1st grade. So we look at 1st grade over to passage reading fluency, and the average growth for kids in 1st grade on this test is 2 words per minute. Okay, sorry, two points, right? Whatever that is, 2 points. So we know what his scars are. They didn't change. His rate of improvement is 1.5. We can just go ahead without even graphing it out and seeing he's growing at a rate less than the other kids. All the other kids are growing at 2 points per week. He's only growing at 1.5. And we know what 4 weeks was remaining, how much he should be gaining. And so with 4 weeks remaining, you would have this ability to look here at the 2. So you multiply the 2 times 8 and figure out his target. So the target line, the goal, connects to the baseline, and you have something that looks like this. So remembering 44 is where he started, and then we have his goal line, which is this darker, blacker line. That's where we want him to get by the end of his intervention. And this is where we think he's going to get based off his current pace. And so this means that how he's doing has a flatter slope than where he needs to be, which is the steeper slope or the blacker line. So we have 3 lines here. We have his actual score, jagged line. We have his rate of improvement, and then we have his goal, where we think he should be. All right, so that is one way of drawing a trend line, is what we just talked about. Here is another way, which is the Tukey method. So you need to have a minimum of 9 data points. You need some pre-data points here, which this is the baseline. And then ideally you would have post data, or if not, you have at least the last 3 data points. So within the last, within the first and the last, you're going to connect a point within the first 3 data points and a point within the last 3 data points. And the Tukey method tells you how you determine what that point is. So in this, you look here and you see, oh, there's 3 data points. There's this one, and this one. The first thing you're supposed to do is choose the median time. So the median time between three data points is going to be the one right in the middle. So really this x should be like right here, okay? And the same thing here. What is the median time at the end? 1, 2, 3. That's going to be the one in the middle. The next thing is the median value. What is the middle value? So you have three values. This one is more, right? This one is, it looks like it's a little less, and then this one is in between. So this value is where you want to be on that line, and this value is where you want to be on that line. So really that x should be about right there. And then over here, you want to be on this line here. And then which of these three is the middle? Not this one, not this one, kind of this one. So really your x should be about right there. So I'm not loving this particular image by Hutton, Dubes, and Muir, but just so that you understand the lines are connected at the middlemost data point and, for where it falls on weeks of instruction. So if there's 3 weeks of instruction, it's going to be the 2. And then the middlemost data point here up and down. So as we discussed, the median points represent both the median for the time and the score. The trend line connects two median points, these two here, this one, and this one. So I want you to try developing a Tukey on your own using James's growth. So these would be his 3 scores. You identify the one in the middle for time and the one in the middle for value. And so his first dot should be here. Where should his second dot here be? So you can pause for a second. All right, so we're going to work this out. So out of these 3 end scores, here is this, and this is both the middle value as well as the middle time. So it would be this one connecting to that one. And it looks just like that. There we go. And so that is another way to straighten the curves. We have the jigga-jagged line, and you connect the two through the Tukey method. So we've talked about 2 different methods of making a trend line. One is using rate of improvement, and the other is using this Tukey median method. With this example for Marco, I want us to go into Excel. And so I have Excel pulled up here. And I know Excel can be intimidating. And so we're just going to kind of do this as we can. So I've put on the left-hand side, baseline 1, 2, 3, and then week 1 through week 12. Now remember, they only had 9 weeks of intervention, but there were 3 more scheduled to go forward. So then I put in the scores. These are the 3 scores we know, plus each of the scores for the 9 weeks of the intervention that were provided. All right, and so remembering when we calculate rate of improvement, we use the smallest score, which was 22, and we subtract it from the highest score, which was 29. So 29 minus 22 is 7. So assuming that the baseline is 1 week of intervention, it's considered 1, or where you start. So we had 9 weeks of intervention. So 29 minus 22 is 7, divided by 9 weeks of intervention is 0.77. All right. So this is the ROI for this person is 0.77. They're learning less than 1 point per week. Okay. And then we've got so now we've got to do something with it. So we multiply that by 1, 2, 3, 4, go ahead and do it by 12 because we want to see how far out it's going. So 0.77 by 12 means this should have gained 9.33 points. You add that back to the 22 and you get 31.33. Okay. And then for the Tukey method, remembering with the Tukey method, you take the first 3 scores, 1, 2, 3 in the baseline, and you choose the middlemost score to write it in. So we're going to put the dot in the middlemost score. And then you look at the numbers, 22, 23, 24. 23 is the middlemost number. So I put the 23 in the baseline 2 spot. And then over here with the Tukey method, 7, 8, and 9. 8 is the middlemost score. We have 27, 29, 28, and 28 is the middle score, and 20 in week 8 is the middlemost position. So notice I'm not putting any other data. I'm just putting in the data that we've calculated. And then the goal line we have calculated here by where we consider the middlemost score out of these, the baseline. And then we went in and found out what the expected growth is on the chart, and that was half, 0.5. And so we had 12 weeks times 0.05 is, I didn't do that right, was 0.5. So 12 weeks times 0.5 is 6. You add that 6 back to the baseline of 23, and you have a 29. So our goal is for him to go from 23 points to 29 points if he's going to stay on track with the growth of the other kids that he's working with. So these are our numbers. So how do we turn these numbers into a graph? First, you have to highlight it, okay? And then you're going to go up here to Insert, and you're going to insert, let's see, they have an option here. Insert recommended charts. Okay, I tend to go to all charts, and what you want is a combo because we're having combination of things. So we have all these things up here. Do we want to include them? Well, in this case, we actually do want to include everything, and we want them all to be line graphs. So I'll do a line graph here, and I'll do a line graph there. And remember, for Tukey, we like to have the line graphs with markers. Okay, so we have all of that, and we're ready to go. We hit OK. So it's created our graph, but noticing it's only showing us our scores. So what we need to do in here is go to the chart filter, and let's see, is it chart filter? Oh, no, we go here. So under each of these, we're going to want to add different things, okay? So one of the things we're going to want to add are the two axes. And so we want the primary horizontal axis, and we're going to want to put a label to it. We want to include it. It's got the information there. Oh, we want the titles. So we want a title for that. So the axis title on the left-hand side here is going to be the score on what I think it was reading comprehension, right? And then we go back here and we're going to add an axis title, but we want it for the primary horizontal. So that's going to be, oh, we just did primary vertical. So we want it for primary horizontal. It's showing up here. We need to enter it here. And we're going to call that weeks. Okay. And we're going to go here and add more stuff. We're going to add a chart title. All right, so right now we took it away. Now we're going to add it, and it allows us to edit it. And so this is going to be Marco's intervention, right? And so then we're going to go here and we're going to add some additional stuff. We don't need the data labels. We can add the table if you just really want to see the scores, but I don't know that that's needed. Error bars don't do anything for me. Grid lines just allow you to have the lines in the middle. The legend is what allows us to know what each of these are, but you'll notice right now all we have are the scores. We can do a trend line, and we'll talk about the trend line in just a minute, and up and down bars. So we have this data here, and you'll notice we still only have the one line. We want to show these other lines, so we're going to click on this, and we're going to be able to go to Select Data, and we want to select all of our data, hidden cells, show the data in hidden cells by connecting them. And we still have all of these, and we hit OK. And now all our lines are there. And so we are able to see all of our lines, but as you can tell, they're all jumbled together because they're too close together. So we need to fix that. We fix that by clicking on this bar, and notice we have all this white space. So we want to click on this bar, and we double click, oh, that didn't do anything, right click then, to format the axis. And the problem is that we have all this stuff from 0. We don't really need it from 0 because the first data point is more than 20. So we're going to set it at 20, and we set it at 20. Now all of a sudden it's readable. It's much more readable. There's also one tiny other issue that you may or may not want to fix, and that is you'll notice all of these kind of project out, except for, of course, you can't do anything with the actual scores, but the Tukey. So if you want to make the Tukey longer, you can come over here, hit this, go to trend lines, say Tukey, hit OK, and you can see where the Tukey would progress out to. So now you have this graph, and you can add other things to it. If you want to put a line right here, baseline one, between the baseline and the intervention, you can just go and insert a line. And you can do a lot of different things to it, so you can then just copy and paste it and move it into whatever you want to move it to. So going back to the PowerPoints here, we have our original question, which is how do we graph for Marco? We have all of the information provided here, and we have all the data provided here, and then we have our graph. And from this graph, we should be able to determine several things. Remembering that we want to look at our goal line here. So here's our goal line, and we have different methods of deciding whether or not the intervention is working for him. So one way is to look at the most recent 4 data points, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're able to say that 3 of the 4 data points are above the goal line. And because they're above the goal line, ideally it would be 4. It would be interesting to see if we had 1 more week. And the trend shows that if we had 1 more week, the 4th data point would be above the goal line. So we could say that the intervention is working. And, we could change his goal because it is above the goal line, but really I think we're kind of really close to him being where he needs to be. You can also, then you could compare that, or you can compare how steep the other lines are. So either the Tukey line here or our rate of intervention line here. And both of those are steeper in terms of how steep they are than this line here, which is the goal line. So that second method of the steeper the line, the better he's doing. Really, they're all very similarly steep, but these are just slightly more so. So again, I think we should just keep him going just the way he is. He's been doing fine. And this is the kind of graph, maybe you would add, again, some line art or something in here to separate the baseline from the actual intervention. This is what it would look like. So I'm going to give you guys Angie here, and I would recommend that you try and do this in Excel yourself. And so I'm going to ask you to pause and work on this. Now, I'm going to also provide, after you pause, what the correct version should look like, and that way you can compare yours to mine. So I realized with the Marco data, I had 4 weeks written on the slide, but we used all of the analysis based off of 3 weeks. So it should have been 3 weeks. So now with Angie, we have everything we need here. Hopefully you've had a chance to do the analysis, and if you added it to Excel, it should have looked like this: baseline, 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 and then you have all the weeks. Then you put in all the scores, and then you calculated the ROI to get this information. So this 23.67 came from this set of calculations. And then your goal line came from the middlemost score, just like it did for the Tukey. So the ROI is based off the smallest score, and the goal line and the Tukey are both based off the middlemost score. And then the goal is calculated here. So this is what your data should look like, and then here's what your graph should look like, wherein that you see the goal line here, the 4 most recent data points, all below the goal line. And the goal line is steeper. So this tells her, and you can even see that as you go along, there's no way she's going to catch up. So this indicates a failure to respond to the intervention.